Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Not Funny Guys Presents Andor Season 1 Rewatch. We are rapidly approaching the end here of Season 1 as we prepare for Season 2. Exciting times. I'm hoping have a lot of expectations for Season 2. But let's talk about our penultimate episode here. We have Episode 11, Daughter of Ferrix. Now, this, of course, is a reference to Marva, which we'll see. Originally aired November 16, 2022. Written by Tony Gilroy, directed by Benjamin Caron. Now, starts off with the basic premise, Marva is dead. Now, unlike Marley was dead at the beginning of The Christmas Carol, Marva was a far more significant person, and a better person than that. But Marva is dead, and this has prompted an initiation of the funeral traditions of Ferrix. And normally they would reject this, but Deidre Miro has decided to let this go forward with the hopes that this will lure Andor back. Vel informs, back on Coruscant, of course, Vel informs Clea that Marva's death and learns of Mon Mothma's reluctant plan, of course, that being her cousin, to allow her daughter to marry the son of Davos Sculdun in order to help her obtain cover for her fundings that she has a big hole is. Of course, her daughter Lita is very much old school when it comes to like Shendrilan culture and tradition, so she's okay with this. Vel is obviously not okay with this based on her lifestyle, and it's distressing both of them. We find out Cyril Karn gets contacted by about the funeral from Linus Mosk, who was the Sergeant Blueberry. Saul Guerrera decides at the last moment that he wants to assist Anton Krieger's attack on Spell House, but Luthen advises him against it. He comes to tell him no, revealing that the ISB know about the impending assault. While returning to Coruscant, Luthen manages to escape an Imperial patrol, which that's super cool, destroying several TIE fighters and a tractor beam in the process. With the help of Caridians Dwi and Freedy, I guess these are the names of the aliens, Cassian and Roshant Melski are able to escape Narkina 5 and travel to Nemos, where he got arrested, to recover his belongings. After Cassian discovers that Marva has passed, Cassian and Melty part ways, and they intend to basically try to publicly expose what's going on with the Empire, and they realize splitting up is probably their best bet. Okay. So let's break this episode down. So let's start with Ferrix. And so like I've been doing, we're going to sort of break this down by theaters. Now, next time we're going to be coming all together, mainly on Ferrix. But we come in with this opening shot, seeing kind of things through like a weird distorted lens with basically B2, right over there on my shoulder. See things. He's not reacting well to Marva's death. Brasso tries to speak with him. They treat him like a person, which is an indicator that in a lot of ways, B2 has never been like reprogrammed. He's like R2-D2 in a way. And Chopper from the Rebel series. This is a character who has developed a personality, has never been reset. So he's very much like a real person. There's this very poignant metaphor of him next to Marva's empty chair, which I think is really nice. But it sort of speaks of the absence, the loss. Again, another Christmas Carol reference, the empty chair of Tiny Tim. I don't think this is intentional, but obviously the spies are watching Marva's house. They're there. They see her taking away. They know there's a solemn ceremony. Cinta and the ISB spy actually in the same room and have a strange interaction. I think she's more aware of who he is than he definitely has no idea who she is. There is a report from the commandant to Deidre Miro about the funeral, about how she's going to be cremated, her ashes mixed with mortar and turned into stone. She is allowed to, Deidre Miro decides to allow her to have the funeral. She wants to use it as a trap. They have 2 days. And so, as Marva is going to be made into a brick, to become part of Ferrix permanently. The ISB spy is coordinating an observation of Brasso at Marva's house. Brasso plans on taking B2 with him, but B2, basically reluctant to leave, convinces him to stay one night in the house with him. We then return to see Bix, and she's in a horrible state from the torture. She's hearing echoes in her head of Dr. Gorst's words to her. She's visited by a guard, and they take her to another room. She's very much broken, and they threaten her with Dr. Gorst, and they ask her about Anton Krieger by showing her a hollow. And they suspect, or maybe they're working on a suspicion that maybe somehow Anton Krieger is Access. And we never really see if she answers this. Of course, she would tell them no, but we just get a sigh. And then eventually, near the end of the episode, from the Ferrix point of view, we have Cassian calling Zan. And Zan is the guy who's in charge of transports, who initially warned him, or at least he initially heard from him way back in episode 3, about them looking for someone from Canary. And he basically, Zan tells him, Zan is kind of one of the ones who was also going to help him leave originally. He finds out, it's through Zan, he finds out his mother's dead. And Zan is sort of like, kind of acting as kind of like a friend. At least he knows Cassian. He's trying to show some kindness to him. And this, of course, will bring us back around when we come back to the end of this episode. This comes kind of towards the end, but like I said, we'll circle back to this. So, back on Coruscant. We are at Luthen's shop. Vel shows up unannounced. She's breaking protocol. She goes in to talk to Clea. They pretend to speak in kind of like a coded language. About products and merchandise. She uses the same coded language when they're on open channels with Luthen. Vel wants Luthen, she wants to speak to Luthen, but Clea is not allowing her, telling her she breaks the rules. There's a real hint that Clea has a lot more of, she's like a control factor in this whole situation. Like, you think Luthen is in charge, and I think he is, but I also think that Clea is a balancing force. They kind of work as a tandem in a weird way. There's a very strange dynamic there, probably for the good of it. Vel tells her, of course, about Marva's death and that she's leaving for Ferrix to meet up with Senta. There's a lot of activity. So she gives him a head up, and she's going to pass this on to Luthen. Mon Mothma, Vel then goes to see Mon Mothma, and she sees Lita. They talk about the old ways of Cinderella, talking about how the traditions are stronger on Coruscant than they even are back home. They talk about this whole idea of safe and the braid. And apparently this is all Lita's idea. No one has pushed her to this. She loves this stuff. Vel also gets Mon confesses to her about the whole money issues. Talks about being warned for months ago by someone back home. And then this is why she reached out to Tay and she trusts him. But after Aldhani, everything's kind of changed. And again, no one gives away who really is in charge, and I guess no one trusts each other. Because Vel was there. Tay basically couldn't help her, but he did find out that she was in more trouble. She's running out of time. They're having a very tense conversation. And this is where she basically says and reveals that she's basically going to have to take Davos up on his offer. And it's breaking her to do this. But she doesn't want to do this, but pretty sure Lita is going to be compliant with it. We'll see the next episode. But this is not how, and Vel is very adamant against this. Finally, we do see Cyril getting a comm kit from, Linus Mosk, Sergeant Blueberry. He's still on Morlana 1, working basically in a factory now. They have a really bad connection, but he does find out about Andor's mom dying, and that he might come back for the funeral. And so, of course, his connection cuts out, but he's obviously planning to go too. So everybody's being pulled back to Ferrix. Cyril, of course, waits in the morning to where his mom leaves, and he basically looks like he goes and steals some credits from her, and like a stash, I guess, to fund his trip off planet. Now, we also have an interesting sidebar here with Luthen and Saw, as I'm calling it. Luthen has gone to see him. Basically, he's still on the same planet he was, Ciro Migro, whatever it was. He's still there. He's on board now at this Rayon Spellhouse. He's going to provide the air cover. Luthen waves him off. Tells him the ISB is going to intercept it. Saw is very suspicious and paranoid. He gets his hackles up. He realizes that Luthen is sacrificing Anton Krieger. And it's only, he says it's only 30 men plus Krieger. Saw realizes he's like I say, he's burning Anton to keep the secret. And Saw thinks Luthen is either an ISB agent himself or he has someone on the inside. He is correct in the instincts. He does have someone on the inside. The difference is that Saul has seen, and this is what Luthen tells him, you've seen me. Anton Krieger is not. So he can afford to burn him. Even if he gets captured, it's not like he can lead back to him. He's in a sense saving Saul. But Saul gets super paranoid. The paranoia kicks into high gear. Yeah, he feels like that Luthen must have eyes on everyone. Saul now demands to know who's buying on him. Luthen plays with him by basically telling him it's Tubes is the guy with the tube. We've seen him in Rogue One. Tubes, of course, denies it. Lucius uses the confusion to pull a gun on Saul and then manages to bring him back to reason from this sort of like downward spiral paranoia he was in. He tells him that basically letting this go through the way it's going to go through, the ISB will feel invincible if they take down Krieger. He basically gives him back the gun and says, for the greater good, and that's what Saul says. And then he ends with, let's call it war. Clea calls Luthen on the Fondor. Again, they're talking the code conversation about Marva and Cassian Andor, about the Ferrix situation. While they're having the convo, an Imperial cruiser, an arrestor cruiser, Cantor class, shows up. And now this is one we haven't seen a lot of in any of the major Star Wars, but it's a tractor beam patrol ship. They basically capture ships, board them, check them. Luthen stalls them while he prepares to escape. He deploys countermeasures that basically destroy their tractor beam. He then uses these weird, like Kyber crystal powered, I'm assuming, lightsaber beams up the side of his ships with blasters to destroy the TIE fighters. It's very badass. And then jumps away, leaving the Imperials looking like complete fools. Which was absolutely, they must be so embarrassed. And then my last bit here is Narkina 5 / Nemos. And of course, we have Cassian and Melty being some people who've managed to avoid capture. They're hanging off a cliff while a patrol goes by. They run into some alien trappers. They try to steal their quad jumper, jumps to the ship. They get caught in a booby trap set by the trappers. Learn that the Imperials, from the aliens, we learned that the Imperials have basically been poisoning the water, stealing from the water, for their prison factories. The natives are resentful natives, and then they basically somehow managed to talk the natives into letting them go with them. And they request Nemos. And so they go back to Nemos, where Cassian retrieves his sate from the suite where he left it. He gets his credits. It has Nimic's manifesto, blasters, all that stuff is in there. After that is when he calls Zan and learns about what's going on back at Ferrix. Part ways with Melchi now, because they don't know if anybody else made it. And so they figure splitting up is a great way for them to get the message out. And Cassian gives him, of course, one of the blasters. I think it's the Morlana 1 one. He has 2. One, I think, is his dad's old blaster. And then there's this beautiful shot we close on with the sun setting. Another example of the sun setting, sun rising metaphor we talked about in episode 3. But we're coming to a close now, so it's time for that final chapter. And that will be going down next time we talk. We'll be having our look at episode 12, Rick's Road, where all of this will come to a head and a glorious ending that I am a super fan of. So I look forward to that, talking to you guys next time. In the meantime, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Share this with people who know or might be interested in some talk about some good Star Wars stuff, positive Star Wars stuff. In addition to that, make sure if you're interested in more products coming from the Not Funny Guys, we have another podcast that's in the works this week, hopefully coming out in a week or so. So keep an eye out for our new podcast. I'll pitch it here during the time when we do start doing the rewatch commentary with me and Eric. Starting next week, we will be doing Andor Season 2. Keep an eye out for that. I'll bring it up. In the meantime, we just finished up the Rambo series. We'll be moving on to 1992, a triple header from 1992, starting with Newsies. As I said previously, a relic and artifact of my childhood. And then, of course, if you follow us on Not Funny Guys Present Off the Reels, and then we have our other podcast, Wrestling with the Horror of It All. If you're into horror films and wrestling discussion, that's where Eric and Casey talk about that stuff there. All right. So that brings us to the end of our penultimate episode. We will then revisit one more before we move on to our rewatching or commentary on season 2, which I'm assuming is going to be a lot of fun. So keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, long live the rebellion. Say Not Funny Guys again.
Not funny guys again.
No, can you say Not Funny Guys?